Hi guys, and welcome to History That Makes You Sleepy. Tonight we step into the pale morning light beside a tiny covered wagon where every board creaks, every leather strap smells of dust and animal sweat, and an entire family is trying to fit its future into a space barely large enough for a bed, a barrel, and several worried faces. You hear chickens fussing nearby, an ox snorting into the cool air, and someone inside the house opening the same cupboard again, as though one last look might make the packing problem disappear. It will not. There are 6 months of road ahead, with mud, heat, rivers, sickness, and uncomfortable family togetherness. You probably will not survive this, at least not if you insist on bringing the good dining chairs. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from, along with your local time. Now, dim the lights, and stand quietly beside the wagon as the household decides what deserves to travel west. The wagon waits in the yard like a wooden question. Its curved canvas cover catches the first grey light, and beneath it lies a narrow box built more for freight than comfort. You do not climb into a cosy mobile cottage with cushions and a cheerful tea shelf. Most emigrant wagons are working vehicles, designed to carry supplies while the family walks beside them. The famous prairie schooner earns its nickname because the white cover looks like a sail from a distance, but there is no ocean beneath it, only ruts, stones, and grass stretching farther than your sleepy eyes can follow. You belong to a family of 5. There is your husband, who has spent the last month discussing axle grease with anyone unable to escape. There are 2 children, old enough to carry bundles and young enough to believe the journey will be a grand adventure. There is a baby, wrapped against the morning chill, and there is you, standing between the open house door and the wagon, understanding that nearly every familiar object must be judged. The arithmetic is cruel. The wagon can carry roughly a ton, perhaps somewhat more if the animals are strong, and the road is kind, though roads rarely show kindness for long. Food comes first. Flour, bacon, beans, coffee, salt, sugar, dried fruit, and cornmeal disappear into sacks and boxes. Water containers claim more room. Tools follow: an axe, shovel, hammer, saw, auger, rope, spare iron, and nails. A mainstream fact settles over the packing. Many overland emigrants travelled in ordinary farm wagons rather than the huge freight wagons seen in Western films. Their vehicles were lighter, narrower, and often pulled by oxen or mules. Oxen are slow, but steady, strong, and better able than horses to survive on coarse grass. They also wear the calm expression of creatures who already know humans have planned something foolish. You lift each thing and imagine carrying it for half a year. Weight becomes a language. A heavy pot is an extra burden on an ox climbing a steep grade. A chest of linens may force you to abandon food later. A rocking chair holds memories, but memories rather inconveniently do not reduce the load. You test the skillet in your hand. It stays. One reliable pan can roast, fry, bake, and boil. The second skillet does not survive the judgment. Neither does the large ceramic serving bowl, beautiful and completely unsuited to bouncing across a continent. The children protest when a wooden toy horse is set aside. After negotiations of almost diplomatic complexity, one small toy is allowed. The family Bible stays too. It offers comfort, records births and marriages, and links you to relatives left behind. The sewing kit is essential. Clothing will tear, canvas will split, socks will surrender. Needles are tiny, but on the trail they become more useful than many grand possessions. A quirky detail appears when your husband produces a jar of axle lubricant made from animal fat and dark graphite. Some travellers use mixtures involving tallow, pine tar, or even bacon grease when proper wagon grease runs low. The smell is thick, smoky, and faintly rancid, like breakfast regretting its choices. Yet a dry axle can heat, crack, or fail, so the ugly jar receives a respected place near the tools. Historians still argue whether emigrant guidebooks truly shaped what families packed, or whether local experience and advice from returning travellers mattered more. Printed guides offered lists, but human beings have always trusted a confident neighbour, especially one who once met a man whose cousin crossed a river successfully. You begin arranging the load. Heavy goods go low and near the centre, helping the wagon remain balanced. Flour sacks are protected from dampness. Tools are placed where they can be reached without excavating the entire household. Bedding is rolled tightly. Clothing goes into trunks, though the trunks themselves may later become burdens. The wagon bed measures only about 10 or 11 feet long and 4 feet wide. Stand inside it, and your shoulders nearly sense both sides at once. The curved hoops rise beneath the canvas, giving an illusion of height, but every corner is claimed. Barrels press against boxes. Bedding lies across sacks. A small gap near the front may hold a child who is exhausted or ill. Outside, neighbours arrive to help. Their voices stay low, someone brings biscuits, someone else checks the harness. Farewells hover in every pause, but no one wants to begin them too early. The morning smells of damp earth, wood smoke, leather, and sweet hay. You return to the table and face the last collection. A framed portrait of your parents, a blue china cup, letters tied with ribbon, a thick quilt stitched by 3 generations of women. The portrait is removed from its frame, the glass left behind. The letters slide into the Bible. The cup, against practical wisdom, is wrapped in cloth and placed inside the coffee pot. The quilt stays because warmth and memory have formed an alliance. Then comes the cradle. It is too large. Everyone knows it. For several minutes no one speaks. The baby sleeps in your arms while the polished wood stands by the door. At last your husband removes one small curved rocker from its base. The rest remains. This is how departure begins. Not with a trumpet or heroic speech, but with subtraction. You keep what feeds you, warms you, repairs what breaks, and reminds you who you were. Everything else waits in the quiet house. The oxen lean into their yokes, chains tighten, wood groans. The wagon moves a few inches, pauses, then rolls forward. A wheel crosses the edge of the yard and enters the road. Behind you, hands rise in farewell. You walk beside the wagon, one palm resting against its rough plank side. Inside are 6 months of flour, tools, blankets, letters, a blue cup, and one piece of a cradle. Ahead, the road opens through the morning mist, and the tiny moving home begins to carry your family away. The road begins to hum beneath your hand. Each turn of the wheel sends a small shiver through the boards, and the wagon answers with a chorus of creaks, taps, and soft thuds. Nothing inside remains truly still. A spoon trembles in its cup. A barrel lid gives a tiny complaint. You lift the rear flap and look into the narrow interior. Now that the wagon is moving, it feels almost alive. The canvas breathes in and out with the wind. Light passes through it in a pale golden glow. Shadows of tree branches slide across the roof like slow fingers. Dust enters through every seam and settles on blankets, flour sacks, faces, and hopes with perfect fairness. The wagon bed is roughly 4 feet wide and perhaps 10 feet long. It is not a room, though everyone keeps asking it to behave like one. It must serve as pantry, tool chest, nursery, sick room, shelter, wardrobe, and emergency bedroom. This is ambitious work for a wooden box. You begin to learn its geography. The front corner belongs to tools that may be needed quickly. The axe lies secured so that a sharp blade does not leap free when a wheel drops into a rut. Rope is coiled beside it. A shovel rests along one wall. Spare parts are tucked beneath bedding. Food occupies the safest spaces. Flour sacks sit away from damp canvas and leaking containers. Bacon is packed in barrels or wrapped carefully, its salty smell mixing with leather and pine. Beans, rice, and cornmeal fill smaller sacks. Coffee is guarded with a seriousness usually reserved for family heirlooms. A well-known historical fact becomes obvious as you inspect the load. Most family members do not ride inside the wagon for long stretches. The space is too crowded, the ride too rough, and the extra weight too demanding on the animals. Children, older adults, pregnant women, or sick travellers may ride when necessary, but many emigrants walk beside their wagons for hundreds of miles. The wagon is less a carriage than a moving storeroom with occasional human cargo. Still, someone must climb inside now and then. You brace one hand against the frame and pull yourself up. Immediately the wagon drops into a shallow rut. The experience is intimate, educational, and not remotely graceful. There are no springs beneath the wagon bed. Every stone speaks directly to your bones. The iron rim of each wheel strikes the road, sending a hard vibration through the planks. You understand why travellers often describe the noise and jolting with weary precision. The canvas cover offers shade but little insulation. It is stretched over curved wooden bows and tied securely along the sides. Rain may drum pleasantly for a few minutes, until you notice water finding a seam above the bedding. The cover is often treated with oil, paint, or another preparation intended to resist water. One odd trail custom involves rubbing canvas with mixtures that may include linseed oil, wax, or even milk-based compounds. Recipes vary wildly, because pioneer chemistry often begins with whatever is nearby and ends when the leaking slows. Some treatments work well, others leave the wagon smelling like a damp kitchen cloth. Scholars continue to debate how often families actually slept inside their wagons rather than beneath them or in tents. Diaries suggest every arrangement appears at some point. A couple may sleep under the wagon. Children may curl near the cargo. Someone ill may receive the coveted interior space. Privacy becomes less a condition than a fond memory. You unroll the bedding to see how sleeping might work. Quilts, blankets, and feather beds consume astonishing amounts of room. At night they may be spread inside, beneath, or beside the wagon. A mattress filled with feathers sounds luxurious until it absorbs moisture, dust, sweat, and several weeks of campfire smoke. The children test the interior eagerly. One crawls across a flour sack and declares a corner comfortable. This privacy lasts until the baby begins crying and someone needs the box beneath the child. Personal territory in the wagon is always temporary. Small objects hang from hooks or pegs along the frame. A lantern swings carefully. Tin cups knock together unless wrapped. A sewing bag stays within reach. Dried herbs may hang in cloth pouches, bringing faint scents of mint, sage, or chamomile into the dusty air. Every item must be tied down. A loose kettle can become a weapon on a steep descent. A barrel rolling toward the rear can damage the tailboard. You learn knots, wedges, straps, and the useful art of stuffing cloth into gaps. Nothing is wasted if it can stop another object from rattling. You notice that order inside the wagon is never permanent. By noon, someone needs the salt buried behind the blankets. A child wants the coat packed beneath the dried apples. The baby requires clean cloth at exactly the moment the cloth bundle has vanished under a sack of beans. Each search disturbs the careful arrangement, so packing becomes a daily ritual rather than a single accomplishment. You lift, shift, retie, and wedge everything again, listening for suspicious rattles before the next mile. The family slowly develops a shared memory of the load. Everyone knows where the matches should be, where the medicine box usually rests, and which barrel must never be opened while the wagon is moving. The wagon also has hidden spaces. Beneath a false floor or between supports, some travellers conceal money, documents, or small valuables. One curious account tells of a traveller hiding money inside a hollowed piece of soap, which seems clever until somebody decides washing is suddenly necessary. You run your fingers over the sideboards. The wood is rough, warm where sunlight reaches it, cool in shadow. Small splinters catch your skin. The wagon is already changing. It carries scars from loading, marks from rope, and dark patches where hands steady themselves. At the rear, the canvas flap can be opened for air or closed against rain and cold. When shut, the interior becomes close and dim. Breath warms the space quickly. A crying child sounds twice as loud. A whisper carries to everyone. There is nowhere to turn without touching family, cargo, or both. And yet, the tiny interior provides comfort. It holds the quilt stitched by familiar hands. It keeps food above wet ground. It offers a roof when rain begins. It creates a boundary, however thin, between your family and the enormous landscape outside. As the wagon rolls onward, you climb down and walk beside it again. Through the lifted flap, you see the children nestled among bundles, their heads glowing in filtered light. The coffee pot sways, the canvas sighs. The moving box seems impossibly small, but for now it contains everything you have chosen to call home. The house has already disappeared behind a bend, but for a while you keep turning your head as though the roof might rise above the trees one last time. It does not. The road carries you forward with patient indifference, and the wagon beside you continues its wooden conversation with every stone. At first, the route still feels familiar. Fences divide fields, smoke curls from distant chimneys, dogs bark from farmyards as the wagon train passes. A woman standing at a gate lifts her hand, and you wonder whether she envies you, pities you, or is simply relieved that she is not walking west with a baby and a barrel of flour. The children begin the morning with excitement. They race beside the wagon, collect smooth stones, and ask how far you will travel before supper. By midday, their questions become slower. By afternoon, one child is dragging a stick through the dust, and the other is studying the wagon with the hopeful expression of someone considering an illegal ride. You walk because the animals need every possible advantage. The wagon is already heavy with food, tools, bedding, cookware, and the carefully wrapped blue cup. Adding several human bodies means greater strain on the team, especially when the road rises. So you stay on your feet and place one step after another into the pale dust. A common historical truth becomes clear very quickly. Many overland emigrants walked most of the journey rather than riding. A person could cover 15 or perhaps 20 miles on a good day, though mud, heat, steep ground, weak animals, and broken equipment could reduce that distance sharply. The westward journey may appear romantic in paintings, but much of it consists of walking beside a squeaking wheel while trying not to develop blisters in every possible location. The wagon train stretches ahead and behind you. Some wagons travel in family groups, others join larger companies for protection, assistance, and shared knowledge. A captain may be elected to organize camp, settle disputes, and decide when to move. This sounds orderly until you remember that the travellers are tired adults who have placed their savings, children, livestock, and futures on the same uncertain road. The first disagreement begins before noon. One driver wants to stop and tighten a wheel. Another argues that the train should reach the creek before resting. Voices rise gently, then less gently. The captain listens, rubs his beard, and announces a brief halt. Everyone pretends this was the obvious decision all along. You welcome the pause. Your shoes already feel warmer and tighter than they did at dawn. Fine grit has worked through the seams. You sit on a roadside stone, remove one shoe, and discover the beginning of a blister on your heel. There are few elegant solutions. A scrap of soft cloth is wrapped around the sore place. Some travellers use grease to reduce rubbing. Others trust thicker stockings, better fitted shoes, or stubbornness. Stubbornness is widely available, though its medical value remains uncertain. A quirky trail habit develops around footwear. Some emigrants hang spare shoes from wagon sides, or pack several pairs because leather wears quickly under constant walking. Children may outgrow shoes before the journey ends, forcing parents to cut openings, trade for larger pairs, or improvise with moccasins and wrapped cloth. The frontier wardrobe is less about fashion and more about keeping the ground from winning. Historians continue to disagree over how disciplined wagon trains usually were during their earliest weeks. Some diaries describe strict schedules and elected rules. Others reveal wandering livestock, late starts, family quarrels, and travellers quietly ignoring the captain whenever his advice becomes inconvenient. Human organisation, it seems, remains human even when surrounded by danger. The halt ends. You pull the shoe back on and stand carefully. The road has changed while you rested. The familiar farms are thinning. Fences appear less often. Trees gather along creeks, but open stretches widen between settlements. The sky seems larger without roofs and church steeples to divide it. The sound of the train becomes your new clock. Before you see the front wagons move, you hear chains tighten and drivers call to their teams. Wooden hubs groan, iron rims grind against stones, harness rings chime softly. Oxen breathe in slow bursts, their hooves pressing dark shapes into the road. Dust rises around your ankles. It clings to damp skin and settles at the back of your throat. When another wagon passes close, a pale cloud rolls over you and turns every face the same tired colour. You taste earth with each breath. The children stop collecting stones. They now ask for water. You give them small drinks because the next reliable source is uncertain. The water is warm from its container and carries a faint wooden taste. Nobody complains. Warm water becomes acceptable surprisingly quickly when the road is dry. At a shallow hill, the animals slow. Everyone who can walk moves away from the wagons. A few people push against the rear boards, though the gesture offers more encouragement than force. The oxen lean forward beneath their yokes. Muscles shift under dusty hides. The wagon rises inch by inch. You place one palm against the same rough plank you touched at departure. The vehicle feels different now. It is no longer waiting to become a home. It is working, straining, rattling, and carrying your choices over the hill. At the top, the land opens. Behind you, the road lies like a faded ribbon. Ahead, it passes through grass and scattered trees toward a horizon without explanation. For the first time, there is no nearby house to offer help. No familiar field, and no neighbour who knows your name. A strange quiet arrives during the late afternoon. The train still creaks and the children still murmur, but your thoughts become slower. Walking creates its own rhythm: step, breath, wheel, hoof. Step, breath, wheel, hoof. The repetition wears away conversation. You begin to notice smaller things. The smell of crushed grass beneath the wheels, the warmth of sunlight on one cheek, the soft ticking of cooling metal during a halt, a hawk circling so high that it seems pinned to the sky. Near evening, the train leaves the main road and gathers on open ground beside a stream. Wagons pull into loose lines. Animals are unyoked. People move stiffly, discovering muscles they did not know could ache. You have travelled only a modest distance, yet the morning seems far away. The children collapse onto a blanket. Your husband examines the wheels and speaks approvingly to the axle grease. The baby wakes, hungry and unimpressed by geography. You look back toward the road, but the eastern horizon has already softened into shadow. Civilization is not gone. There will be towns, trading posts, and scattered settlements ahead. Still, something has shifted. Help is no longer assumed. Distance now separates every comfort. As darkness begins to settle, you understand the first lesson of the trail. The wagon may carry the household, but your own feet must carry you. Tomorrow, before the stiffness fades, you will rise and do it again. Morning does not arrive gently on the trail. It begins with the rustle of blankets, the low complaint of tired joints, and the deep breathing of animals waiting in the darkness. A faint grey band appears along the eastern horizon, but the camp is already stirring before the sun has properly introduced itself. You open your eyes beneath the wagon and remain still for one hopeful moment. The ground is hard against your shoulder. Cold air has slipped beneath the quilt. Somewhere nearby, a child is coughing, a mule is stamping, and a tin cup has fallen over with a noise far too confident for this hour. Then someone calls that it is time to rise. You crawl from the bedding and discover that yesterday's walking has settled into every muscle. Your feet ache, your back feels older, your fingers are stiff from gripping ropes and lifting boxes. There is no quiet morning tea beside a warm stove. There is only work, and the work must begin before the animals wander, the weather changes, or another wagon company reaches the trail ahead of you. The first task is fire. Last night's coals are examined beneath a layer of ash. A faint red glow survives, and you kneel close, feeding it dry grass, twigs, and carefully saved chips of wood. Smoke curls into your face. Your eyes water. You blow gently until a small flame catches. On treeless plains, fuel may become precious. Families burn dried buffalo dung, commonly called buffalo chips, because wood is scarce and cooking must continue. The chips burn with surprisingly little odour once fully dry, though gathering them in an apron does remove some of the poetry from Westward expansion. This is one of the practical realities recorded again and again in emigrant accounts. Camp routine depends on the landscape. In wooded country you gather branches. On open prairie you collect dried dung, twisted grass, or anything else willing to burn. A fire is not merely comforting. It boils water, cooks food, warms children, dries clothing, and provides a small circle of light against the enormous night. You set the coffee pot over the flame. The water heats slowly. Cornmeal is stirred into a simple mush, while slices of bacon hiss in the skillet. The smell travels through camp and wakes anyone still pretending to sleep. Breakfast is plain but welcome. You eat quickly because the camp is already being dismantled around you. Blankets are shaken, rolled and tied. Cooking tools are wiped and packed. Children search for missing shoes. One shoe is found beneath a flour sack, though nobody can explain how it arrived there. The animals must be gathered and prepared. During the night, oxen may graze under watch, remain tied near camp or wear hobbles designed to limit wandering. They still manage impressive acts of inconvenience. One ox has moved into tall grass. Another stands beside the stream with the peaceful expression of an animal who does not understand schedules and does not intend to begin. You approach slowly, speaking in a low voice. The hide beneath your hand feels cool and slightly damp. Flies gather near the animal's eyes. A tail swings lazily, striking your sleeve. The wooden yoke is lifted into place across the oxen's necks. Bows curve beneath, holding the yoke securely. Chains connect the team to the wagon. Leather straps are checked. Hooves are inspected for stones, cracks, or tenderness. Experienced drivers know their animals individually. One ox pulls steadily, but dislikes sudden noise. Another is strong, yet inclined to drift toward grass. Names such as Buck, Bright, Duke, or Star are common, and commands are repeated until animal and driver understand one another through tone as much as language. Researchers remain divided over how often wagon companies formed a true defensive circle at night. Popular films show perfect rings of wagons appearing at every camp, but diaries suggest that emigrants often arrange wagons according to terrain, grazing needs, convenience, and available space. A rough enclosure might help contain livestock, yet forming a tight circle every evening could be difficult and unnecessary. Your own train does not create a neat circle this morning because it never formed one last night. The wagons stand in a loose curve beside the stream, each family selecting a patch of ground that seemed tolerable in fading light. The arrangement is practical rather than dramatic. History once again refuses to pose properly for the painting. Before departure, the wagon receives its daily inspection. Your husband checks the wheel hubs, touching them for signs of heat. Axle grease is applied where needed. Remember that fragrant jar of fat and graphite? It has already become one of the most valued possessions in the wagon. which is a humbling development for the Blue Cup. Ropes are tightened, barrels are wedged firmly, the canvas is examined for tears, a loose iron fitting is struck into place with a hammer, each blow ringing across the cool morning. By the time the sun clears the horizon, the camp has vanished. Fires are smothered, refuse is buried or burned when possible. Nothing remains except flattened grass, damp ashes, wheel tracks, and a few small objects someone will miss by noon. The train begins moving again. Hours pass beneath a widening sky. You walk, rest briefly, and walk again. At midday, the wagons halt long enough for animals to graze and people to eat cold food or prepare something simple. There's rarely time for a grand meal. Bread, bacon, cheese, dried fruit, or leftover cornmeal must be enough. By late afternoon, attention turns toward the next camp. Water matters most. Grass for the animals is nearly as important. Shelter from wind is welcome, though not always available. The captain and experienced travellers scan the landscape for smoke, tree lines, low ground, and signs of a stream. When a suitable place appears, relief moves through the company. The wagons leave the trail and settle across the ground. Chains slacken, yokes are removed. The oxen lower their heads almost immediately to graze. Evening labour begins before you can sit. You fetch water, carrying its weight carefully from the stream. Children gather fuel. Someone cuts grass for bedding. Another traveller repairs a torn harness. The skillet emerges once more, blackened by smoke and polished by constant use. A peculiar custom in some camps is the use of a hanging cloth or wagon blanket as a temporary wall for washing or changing clothes. It offers almost no sound privacy and only uncertain visual privacy, especially when the wind rises, but everyone agrees to behave as though dignity has been fully restored. Supper simmers while the light softens. Beans thicken in a pot. Bacon fat adds flavour. Coffee is poured into tin cups. Voices become quieter as darkness gathers. After eating, utensils are cleaned with sand, water, or cloth. Food is sealed against insects and animals. The medicine box is checked. Children are inspected for blisters, splinters, and bites. Clothing is mended beside the fire, needle flashing briefly in the glow. A watch may be arranged for the livestock. The night holds risks from wandering animals, thieves, storms, and simple confusion. A lost team can halt an entire family's journey. You spread the bedding beneath the wagon again. Above you, the wooden floor still holds the day's warmth. The canvas stirs softly. Nearby fires fade into red points. Your body's exhausted, but your mind follows the routine once more. Fire, food, water, animals, harness, wheels, walking, camp, repair, sleep. Tomorrow the sequence will repeat, shaped by rain, terrain, illness, and luck. For now, the last voices fade. An ox bell sounds somewhere in the dark, slow and distant, and the trail settles around you until morning calls everyone back to work. By the next morning, food has already become less of a pleasure and more of a calculation. You sit beside the fading fire with a tin plate balanced on your knees, watching a spoonful of cornmeal mush slowly lose its steam. The children stare at their portions with the solemn disappointment of people who remember that yesterday's breakfast looked remarkably similar. There is bacon too, though not much. A few narrow pieces curl in the skillet, releasing a rich, salty smell that travels through camp with almost magical efficiency. Heads turn, dogs appear from nowhere. Even the oxen seem faintly interested, though they have grass and therefore no right to judge your menu. You divide the bacon carefully. Every slice used today is one less slice available in the mountains, where fresh food may be scarce and cold, weather may demand more energy. The journey is only beginning, but successful families learn early that appetite cannot be allowed to make every decision. The provisions inside the wagon form the hidden foundation of survival. Flour may be the largest single food supply. Cornmeal, beans, rice, dried fruit, salt, sugar, Coffee and cured meat fill barrels, sacks, and boxes. Some families carry vinegar, molasses, pickles, cheese, or dried vegetables. A fortunate traveller may have spices, though pepper begins to feel luxurious after weeks of bland meals. One widely recorded fact is that trail guides often recommended hundreds of pounds of flour for each adult making a long overland journey. Bread, biscuits, dumplings, and thickened stews all depend upon it. Flour is filling, familiar, and flexible, but it is also vulnerable. Moisture can spoil it. Insects can invade it. A torn sack can spill precious meals into the dirt. You inspect one bag after breakfast. The cloth feels dry, but fine white dust has gathered near a seam. A few stitches have loosened during the jolting ride. You fetch the sewing kit and repair the opening before it grows. Losing a handful of flour may seem minor, yet 6 months of small losses can become hunger. This same caution applies to bacon. Salted pork keeps longer than fresh meat, especially when packed carefully in barrels with bran or additional salt. It provides fat and flavour, two things that become increasingly valuable when meals are built from beans and flour. Still, heat can turn it rancid, and poorly sealed containers invite insects. You lift the lid of the bacon barrel and breathe cautiously. The smell is powerful but acceptable. This is not a sentence you expected to use when leaving home, yet the trail offers many new standards for happiness. Breakfast ends, and the remains are collected. A crust of bread is not casually discarded. It may be softened in soup, fried in grease, or handed to a child later. Bacon fat is poured into a small container rather than thrown away. It can flavour beans, grease a skillet, enrich dough, or rescue a meal that otherwise tastes like warm disappointment. The wagon rolls onward, and food travels in your thoughts. Every rough patch threatens a jar. Every rain cloud threatens the flour. Every hot afternoon raises questions about the meat. You begin to listen for changes in the sound of the load. A shifting barrel has a different rhythm from a secure one, and a broken jar announces itself with a wet, muffled crack that nobody wishes to hear. At midday, the train pauses beside a stand of trees. There is no full cooking fire. Instead, you bring out cold biscuits made the previous evening. They are dense enough to serve as building material, but they soften when dipped into coffee. One unusual trail trick involves placing hard bread or biscuits near steam, inside a covered pan, or briefly in hot liquid to make them easier to chew. Another method is to crumble them into bacon grease. This produces something warm, salty, and remarkably satisfying, provided you do not ask too many questions about nutrition. The children receive dried apples. They chew slowly, drawing out the sweetness. Dried fruit is useful because it keeps well and offers welcome variety. It can be eaten alone, stewed in water, added to bread, or cooked into a rough pudding. It also helps prevent the misery caused by a diet made almost entirely of meat and refined grain. Experts remain uncertain about how closely most emigrant families followed the ration lists printed in guidebooks. Some probably began with careful quantities measured for each person. Others packed according to money, local availability, family habit, or optimistic guesswork. Diaries suggest that plans often changed after animals weakened, wagons broke, or food proved heavier than expected. You cannot calculate every risk, but you can watch the supplies. A small notebook records what is used. Flour is measured rather than scooped freely. Sugar is guarded. Coffee is brewed weaker than anyone openly admits. Coffee deserves special attention. For many travellers, it is comfort, routine, and morale in one dark cup. Green coffee beans may be carried because they keep well, then roasted in a pan over the fire and ground when needed. The roasting produces a deep, warm fragrance that briefly transforms a dusty camp into something almost civilized. Of course, roasting beans evenly in a black skillet while smoke blows into your eyes is not the peaceful domestic ritual imagined in advertisements. Some beans burn, others remain pale. The result is crushed, boiled, and consumed anyway. As the afternoon lengthens, the children point toward bushes near the trail. Berries may offer fresh flavour, but unfamiliar plants bring danger. You gather only what experienced travellers recognise: wild greens, onions, berries, nuts, and roots can supplement stored food, though seasons and landscapes decide what is available. Hunting may also provide fresh meat. Men sometimes leave the trail hoping for deer, antelope, birds, or buffalo. A successful hunt can feed several families, yet hunting takes time, ammunition, and energy. It can also tempt people to waste meat or fall behind the train. There is a persistent image of emigrants dining constantly on buffalo, but daily meals are usually far less dramatic. Flour, bacon, beans, and coffee appear again and again. Fresh meat is welcome, not guaranteed. At the evening camp, you soak beans in a pot. If soaked long enough, they cook more quickly and consume less fuel. This matters where wood is scarce. A small piece of bacon goes into the water, followed by salt and perhaps an onion gathered earlier. You mix flour with water, salt, and a little fat. The dough is shaped into simple biscuits and placed in a covered iron pot with coals beneath and above. The lid traps heat, creating a rough oven. Soon the smell of baking bread drifts through camp. A spoonful of dried fruit becomes a sweet sauce. The children watch it thicken as though witnessing a royal banquet. Hunger sharpens appreciation. A meal that once seemed plain now feels generous because it is warm, shared, and slightly different from yesterday's. You eat slowly beside the fire. Beans, bread, a trace of bacon, and stewed apples fill the plate. No dish is elegant. Nothing matches the blue cup still wrapped safely inside the wagon. Yet the food quiets the ache in your stomach and restores strength to tired legs. After supper you examine the stores again. The sacks remain dry. The barrels remain closed. The sugar is lower than you would like because someone has been generous with morning coffee and refuses to identify himself. You tighten every lid and retie every cord. The provisions settle back into darkness beneath the canvas. For now, there is enough. Tomorrow, however, the road will ask another question. Food can be counted, protected, stretched, and substituted. Water is less patient. A barrel cannot be filled with determination, and the next stream may be farther away than anyone expects. The thought of water follows you into the next morning, quiet but persistent, like the ache in your feet. Before the oxen are yoked, before the blankets are rolled, before the coffee pot begins its familiar rattle, you check the barrels. You press your palm against the wooden side of the nearest one. The surface is cool from the night air. When you tilt it slightly, water shifts inside with a heavy, precious sound. Not much has been used since yesterday, but already you have begun to measure every cup in your mind. Water is heavier than nearly anything else you carry. 1 gallon weighs more than 8 pounds, and a family needs far more than a single gallon each day once drinking, cooking, washing, and animals are considered. Yet carrying enough for every possible delay would burden the wagon until the oxen could barely move. So the trail forces you into an uncomfortable bargain. You must carry enough to survive, but not so much that the weight destroys the journey. The wagon train leaves camp beneath a pale sky. The stream beside you narrows into silver threads among the grass, then disappears behind a low ridge. Several travellers look back at it. No one says anything. Everyone knows the next dependable water may be many miles ahead. At first the morning remains cool. Dew clings to the grass and darkens the hems of your clothing. The children walk quietly, still sleepy. The oxen pull with steady patience, their hooves making soft impressions in the damp soil. By mid-morning the sun has burned away the dew. The road becomes dry and powdery. Dust rises behind the wagons and hangs in the air. Your mouth begins to feel rough. You take a small drink from a tin cup. Hold the water for a moment before swallowing and resist the urge to ask for more. A firmly established detail of overland travel is that routes often follow rivers, creeks, springs, and known watering places whenever geography allows. Water determines campsites, daily distances, and even which trail a company chooses. Maps may show a broad route west, but in practice the journey bends toward every reliable source. The animals are even more demanding. Oxen can endure hardship, but they require regular access to water and grass. A thirsty team slows, weakens, and may refuse to pull. If several animals fail, the wagon stops, regardless of how determined the family may be. Near noon, a rider from the front returns with news of a creek ahead. Relief passes through the train, but the word creek has become dangerously flexible. It may mean clear running water. It may also mean a muddy hollow visited recently by livestock, insects, and every form of bad judgment nature can provide. You reach it after another hour. The creek is shallow and brown. Hoofprints churn the banks into thick mud. A green film clings to one quiet pool. Flies hover above the surface. The children stare at it, then at you. This is the water. You do not drink immediately. Containers are filled from the clearest moving section, preferably upstream from animals and washing. Cloth can strain out leaves, grit, and small creatures. Letting muddy water stand allows some sediment to sink. Boiling offers protection against many illnesses, though fuel and time are not always available. People on the trail do not understand microbes as modern science does, but experience teaches them that some water brings sickness. Travellers describe bad wells, foul pools, and rivers that leave entire camps weak with stomach illness. They may blame minerals, decay, weather, or mysterious unhealthy vapours. The explanation is incomplete, yet the danger is real. One curious method for improving muddy water involves stirring in a small amount of cornmeal or crushed charcoal, then allowing the mixture to settle before pouring off the clearer water. Some travellers also use alum when they have it. These methods can reduce visible cloudiness, though a cup that looks clean may still contain invisible threats. You fill the coffee pot and set it over a quick fire. Boiling water for every person requires fuel, patience, and several rounds of heating. The children wait nearby, licking dry lips. When the water is finally cool enough, they drink slowly under your watch. A continuing point of disagreement among researchers concerns how consistently emigrants boiled questionable water. Advice manuals often recommended caution, but diaries reveal exhaustion, haste, and intense thirst. A family facing a muddy stream after a long dry stretch may know the risk and drink anyway. Human beings are rarely at their most disciplined when their tongues feel like old leather. The barrels are refilled before departure. You inspect each one for leaks. Wooden staves can shrink when dry, opening narrow gaps. Iron hoops loosen. A slow drip may go unnoticed until the container is half empty. One barrel shows a damp line near the bottom. You wipe it away and watch. Another bead forms. Your husband tightens the hoop, then presses soft material into the seam. Cloth, wax, pitch, or fat may serve as a temporary seal. The repair looks uncertain, but the dripping slows. Nothing on the trail is ever fully repaired. It is persuaded to continue. The afternoon grows hotter. The water inside the barrels warms and takes on the taste of wood. Nobody expects it to be refreshing. Refreshment is a luxury. The goal is simply to remain strong enough to keep walking. You ration carefully. Adults take measured drinks. Children are reminded not to spill. A little water moistens flour for the evening meal. Another portion is saved for the baby. Washing is reduced to a damp cloth passed over face, hands, and neck. Clothing remains dusty. Hair feels gritty. Sweat dries into salt along your skin. You begin to understand how quickly cleanliness becomes secondary when every cup has to be carried. The road crosses a low, open stretch where no trees grow. Heat rises from the ground in wavering sheets. The horizon appears to shimmer. For a brief moment, a dark patch ahead resembles a pond. It vanishes as you approach. No one laughs. Late in the day, the lead wagons halt beside a spring hidden among reeds. The water emerges slowly from the ground, clear but limited. Families gather with buckets and pans waiting their turn. Animals are held back until drinking water is collected. Tempers tighten. One traveller fills more containers than others believe fair. Another complains that his children have gone without enough. The captain steps between them and establishes an order. Water turns politeness into negotiation very quickly. You kneel near the spring. The soil is cool beneath your knees. Clear water gathers in a shallow basin, trembling as it rises. You dip the cup carefully, trying not to disturb the mud. The first sip is cold. It carries a faint mineral taste, but it feels almost sweet after the warm barrel water. You drink slowly. The children do the same. Even the baby becomes quiet after feeding. As evening settles, the camp remains close to the spring. Supper is modest because cooking uses water. Beans are saved for another night. You make a thin porridge and brew weak coffee. Around you, people fill every available vessel. Kettles, jars, buckets, and barrels stand in rows. A few damp cloths hang from wagon wheels. Oxen drink deeply at a lower pool, their muzzles stirring the reflected sky. You listen to the soft splash and think of the miles ahead. Flour can be stretched, bacon can be divided. A broken tool can be mended, but water allows no clever substitute. Before sleep, you check the repaired barrel once more. The seam is holding. You place a cup beneath it anyway. Above the wagon, stars gather across the darkening sky. Beneath them, the spring continues its slow, patient flow, filling one container after another while the entire camp waits beside it, grateful for every clear drop. The cold spring remains behind you, and by mid-morning the memory of it already feels unreal. The sun climbs into a cloudless sky, bright and steady, turning the road pale beneath your feet. Heat gathers first along your shoulders, then across your back, then inside your shoes, where dust and sweat begin another quiet argument. The wagon cover glows beside you. From a distance, the white canvas looks cool and airy, almost graceful. Up close, it holds the warmth like a tent pitched beside an oven. The children discover this when they ask to ride. You lift the rear flap, and a breath of trapped air rolls outward. It smells of canvas, flour, leather, bacon, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of dried apples. None of those scents is terrible alone. Together, warmed for several hours, they form a fragrance best described as determined. Inside, the wooden boards are hot beneath your hand. The canvas blocks direct sunlight, but it also slows the movement of air. With the rear flap closed against dust, the interior becomes close and dim. With it open, the dust enters freely. The wagon offers choices, though none are especially generous. You settle the youngest child near the rear, where a small breeze may reach. The older children return to walking after only a few minutes. Yesterday they begged to ride. Today they climb down without discussion. Across the plains, summer heat shapes the entire routine of travel. Many wagon companies rise before dawn and cover as much ground as possible during the cooler hours. When temperatures become severe, they may rest during the worst part of the afternoon and move again later. The decision depends on water, grass terrain, and the condition of the animals. Oxen suffer beneath the sun too. Their breathing grows heavier. Flies gather around their faces. Dust coats their hides, turning dark hair grey. Drivers watch for slowing steps, lowered heads, and signs that the team needs rest. The train moves toward a line of cottonwoods, but distance behaves strangely in open country. Trees that appear an hour away remain on the horizon long after you expect to reach them. The air shimmers above the road, bending the view. A patch of sky near the ground resembles water until the wagon rolls closer and reveals only more grass. You pull your bonnet farther forward. Its brim shades your face and neck, though warm air still presses against your skin. Men wear broad hats when they have them. Long sleeves protect against burning sunlight, even when every instinct suggests removing layers. Sunburn is more than discomfort. Repeated exposure can blister skin, weaken a traveller, and make every movement painful. Trail clothing therefore balances heat against protection. Linen and cotton breathe more easily than heavy wool, but many families carry what they already own rather than wardrobes designed for crossing a continent. One peculiar method of sun protection involves coating exposed skin with grease, clay, flour paste, or plant mixtures. Some travellers borrow practical knowledge from indigenous people or experienced hunters, while others invent remedies with the confidence of people who have no mirror nearby. A face covered in flour and bacon fat may reduce burning slightly, though it also gives insects an exciting new reason to visit. You dampen a cloth and press it against the back of your neck. The relief lasts only moments before the moisture warms. Water is too valuable to waste freely, so the cloth returns to the wagon nearly dry. The road becomes softer beneath deep dust. Each footstep sinks slightly. Wagon wheels carve wide grooves, lifting pale clouds that drift through the train. The lead wagons breathe cleaner air. Everyone behind them receives the road in powdered form. Dust settles in your eyelashes. It collects at the corners of your mouth. It works beneath your collar and into the folds of clothing. When you wipe your face, the cloth turns brown. When you drink, a thin line of mud appears along the rim of the cup. Voices grow quieter. Conversation requires breath, and breath means swallowing dust. Even the children conserve their complaints, which may be the strongest evidence that conditions have become serious. A question still divides historians studying overland travel. Did extreme heat cause companies to change their schedules as often as diaries suggest? Or did later memories emphasize the most punishing days? Personal accounts are uneven. Some travellers record weather carefully. Others mention it only when a storm destroys a tent or the sun makes ordinary life impossible. What is certain is that heat appears again and again as a daily burden rather than a single dramatic event. Near noon, the captain calls a halt. The trees are still distant, but a shallow rise provides a little breeze. Wagons are positioned so their canvas sides cast narrow strips of shade. Everyone seeks those strips immediately. You spread a blanket beneath the wagon. The earth is dry and warm, yet the shadow feels merciful. The baby lies beside you, cheeks flushed. You loosen clothing and offer water in small amounts. The older children rest with their heads against rolled bedding. The wagon itself ticks and creaks as its metal fittings expand in the heat. Flies circle the animals. Grasshoppers leap through the brittle grass. Somewhere inside the cargo, a jar gives a soft pop as pressure shifts beneath its lid. Food must be watched carefully. Butter, if any remains, softens into liquid. Bacon grows stronger in scent. Cheese sweats oil through its wrapping. Flour remains safe only if kept dry and protected from insects. You check the provisions, moving quickly because the interior feels suffocating. Sweat gathers along your hairline. Your dress clings between your shoulders. The air near the roof seems hotter than the air below, and every object radiates stored warmth. The family eats without cooking. Biscuits, dried fruit, and a little cold bacon are passed around. Nobody wants to crouch beside a fire. Coffee is absent, an omission so severe that several adults stare into the distance as though reconsidering the entire migration. Rest lasts through the fiercest part of the afternoon. Some people sleep, others mend clothing or inspect harnesses in the shade. A man nearby removes a boot and pours out an astonishing quantity of dust. He studies it thoughtfully, perhaps wondering whether he's been walking on the road or carrying it. When the train moves again, the sun has shifted westward but remains fierce. Shadows lengthen beside the wagons. The breeze strengthens, bringing relief and new clouds of dust. Insects arrive toward evening. Mosquitoes gather near low ground and water. Gnats hover around eyes and lips. Flies follow animals into camp. Smoke from small fires helps discourage them, though it also fills the air with another layer of irritation. You rub exposed skin with a little vinegar and water. Others use grease, herbs, smoke, or strong-smelling plants. Nothing works completely. The insects continue their meal with impressive commitment. At last the cottonwoods rise around you. Their leaves tremble overhead, making a soft watery sound in the breeze. The shade beneath them feels almost cold after the open plain. You lower yourself beside the wagon and lean against the wheel. Heat still radiates from the iron rim. Inside, the canvas slowly releases the warmth it has held all day. Night will bring cooler air, perhaps even a chill. For now, you watch the sky deepen from white to gold, grateful for shadow, breeze, and the simple permission to stop moving. Tomorrow the air may change, clouds may gather, wind may rise. The same canvas that traps today's heat will soon be asked to resist rain, hail, mud, and sudden cold. The first warning arrives as a silence. The cottonwood leaves stop trembling. Insects vanish from the warm evening air. Even the oxen seem to lift their heads together, turning toward the western horizon where a dark line has begun to rise beneath the fading gold. You are still gathering cups from supper when the wind reaches camp. It comes low across the grass, cool enough to raise bumps along your arms. Dust rolls before it in a broad brown sheet. Canvas covers snap sharply. Loose clothing whips against legs. Someone shouts for the children, and suddenly every family is moving at once. The pleasant shade of the cottonwoods becomes a hazard. Branches twist overhead, groaning beneath the force of the gusts. You push bedding into the wagon, secure the rear flap, and check each rope along the canvas. The knots feel tight, but the cover pulls upward as though a giant hand is trying to peel it away. Your husband drives an extra stake into the ground and fastens a rope to the wagon frame. Another traveller runs between teams, calming animals startled by thunder. The oxen press close together, their eyes wide, their hides twitching whenever lightning flashes. Rain begins with scattered drops, large and cold. They strike the dust and leave dark circles. For a few breaths the storm seems hesitant. Then the sky opens. Water drums against the wagon cover so loudly that conversation becomes impossible. You climb inside with the children and pull the flap shut behind you. The interior turns dim and close. Rain finds the canvas in thousands of rapid impacts, a constant roar above your head. A flash of lightning turns the white cover bright as a lantern. Thunder follows almost at once, shaking the wooden bows. The baby cries. One child covers both ears. The other tries to appear brave and fails in a very responsible manner. You sit among the cargo, holding them close while the wagon rocks on its wheels. Water runs down the outer canvas and gathers beneath the wagon. A thin stream enters near the tailboard, curling around a sack before you can stop it. You grab a cloth and press it into the gap. Another drip forms near the roof, then another. Waterproof canvas is a hopeful description rather than a permanent condition. Covers treated with oil or paint can resist ordinary rain, but seams wear, fabric stretches, and repeated exposure creates weak places. Families carry patches, needles, thread, and spare cloth. Because a leaking roof can ruin bedding, clothing, medicine, and food. You move the flour away from the damp boards, blankets are lifted onto boxes. The blue cup remains wrapped safely inside the coffee pot, protected from the storm by an arrangement nobody would have predicted at the beginning of the journey. Outside, the wind changes direction. Rain strikes the wagon sideways. The canvas bows inward, then snaps back. You can hear people calling through the darkness, though their words vanish beneath the weather. One established feature of plains travel is the speed with which conditions can change. A hot afternoon may give way to a violent thunderstorm, hail, or a sudden drop in temperature. With few substantial shelters available, travellers depend on wagons, tents, blankets, and whatever protection the landscape offers. The storm soon adds hail. At first the stones are small, tapping against the cover like thrown seeds. Then larger pieces strike with hard, hollow knocks. The children stare upward. You stare too, wondering how much punishment the canvas can endure. Some emigrants place mattresses, quilts, or spare canvas against exposed sides during severe hail. It protects people and cargo, though it also risks soaking the bedding. Tonight you hold a folded blanket against the weaker section while your husband braces the frame from outside. A curious weather precaution appears in a few trail accounts. Travellers sometimes place metal cooking pots over small valuables or fragile dishes before a hailstorm. The method does not protect the wagon, but it may save a treasured cup from becoming several treasured pieces. For once, the iron kettle receives a promotion to bodyguard. The storm passes almost as quickly as it arrived. Rain weakens to a steady patter. Thunder moves eastward. You lift the flaps slightly and cold air enters the wagon. The camp has changed. Small streams run between the wheels. Fires are gone. Blankets, buckets, and scraps of cloth lie scattered in the mud. A broken branch has fallen across one family's tent. People move through the darkness with lanterns, checking animals and calling names. No one is missing. That is enough for the moment. You climb down and sink ankle-deep into mud. The ground that was hard and dusty an hour ago now clings to your shoes with astonishing determination. Each step makes a wet, sucking sound. Cold settles quickly after the heat of the day. Your damp sleeves stick to your skin. Wind passes through the fabric and you begin to shiver. A fire must be rebuilt, though nearly everything is wet. You search beneath the wagon, and inside a covered box for dry tinder. A handful of shavings survives. Someone shares glowing coals preserved in a metal container. After several attempts, smoke rises, followed by a weak flame. People gather close. Clothing steams faintly. The children hold their hands toward the heat while you warm water for a drink. Coffee appears despite the late hour because hardship has suspended ordinary rules. Researchers continue to question how often weather, rather than illness or equipment failure, caused emigrant companies to lose entire days. Journals mention frequent delays from rain and mud, but records vary by route and season. What no diary needs to exaggerate is the difficulty of moving a loaded wagon through soaked ground. Morning proves the point. This sky clears before sunrise, revealing stars and a thin silver moon. By dawn, the temperature has fallen sharply. Frost touches the grass in low places, even though the previous afternoon felt like midsummer. You wake beneath damp bedding with stiff fingers and a cold nose. The fire has burned low. Every garment feels clammy. Boots are coated with drying mud. When the train attempts to leave, the first wagon sinks deeply into the track. Oxen strain against their yokes. Wheels turn slowly, lifting thick slabs of earth. Men and women push at the rear while children carry lighter objects across the worst ground. Your wagon follows. You remove what can be moved without exposing food to rain. Tools, blankets, and smaller boxes are carried by hand to firmer soil. The oxen lean forward. Chains tighten. The wheels rotate half a turn, then stop. Everyone pushes. Mud splashes your dress. Your shoes slide. The wagon moves another foot. Again the team pulls. Again you push. The rear wheel rises from the rut with a deep, wet groan and settles onto firmer ground. Progress continues in exhausting fragments. A mile may consume the morning. Every low place becomes a trap. Every slope demands extra force. By afternoon, the sun returns and begins baking the mud onto wheels, boots, and clothing. Deep ruts harden behind the train. The road becomes rougher than before, shaped by the storm into ridges and holes. You look at the wagon cover. Dark wet patches remain along the seams. One section bears a small tear from the hail. It will need stitching before the next storm, yet the flour is dry. The children are safe. The the animals still pull. As evening approaches, a colder wind moves down from distant high ground. You wrap the quilt around your shoulders and remember yesterday's suffocating heat. The trail has changed its mood completely, offering no apology. Above you, the sky clears into a calm blue that gives no sign of what passed through it. Beneath the wheels, mud continues to cling. The wagon rolls onward, patched, damp and stubborn, carrying your family into air that grows colder with every mile. The colder air does not leave when morning comes. It settles into the wagon canvas, the damp blankets, and the joints of everyone who spent the night curled against the ground. You wake to the sound of coughing nearby, first one person, then another, as though the camp is passing the noise from wagon to wagon. Your youngest child feels warm. At first, you tell yourself it is only the quilt, or the closeness of the wagon, or the restless night after the storm. You touch the child's forehead again. The skin is dry and hotter than your own. The trail does not stop for uncertainty. Animals must be gathered. Breakfast must be prepared. Wet canvas must be examined. Yet every task now bends around the same question. Is this passing discomfort, or the beginning of something dangerous? You offer water. The child drinks a little, then turns away. There is no appetite for cornmeal or biscuit. A cough follows, shallow but persistent. The medicine box comes out from beneath the bedding. It is smaller than you remember. At home, illness existed within reach of neighbours, a physician, a settled kitchen, and a bed that did not move. Here, all treatment must fit inside a wooden case carried over mud and stone. The box may hold laudanum, calomel, quinine, castor oil, peppermint, camphor, mustard, bandages, and simple instruments. Some remedies can ease pain or fever. Others carry serious risks of their own. Dosages are uncertain, labels fade, and advice passes from one traveller to another with great confidence and uneven wisdom. A familiar truth from the overland trails is that disease killed more emigrants than dramatic attacks or accidents. Cholera, dysentery, measles, respiratory infections, and other illnesses move quickly through crowded companies. Poor sanitation and contaminated water increase the danger, especially when many travellers camp at the same streams and springs. The memory of yesterday's muddy creek returns. You boil water again, though fuel is scarce. Cups are washed more carefully. The child receives small sips and rests inside the wagon while the rest of the family walks. The ride is rough, but at least there is shade and a place to lie down. The wagon begins moving with the train. You stay near the rear flap, listening to every change in breathing. The wheels strike hardened ruts left by the storm. Each jolt shifts the bedding beneath the child. There is no trained doctor in your company. One traveller has helped deliver babies. Another once worked near an apothecary. A third has a book of household remedies and reads from it with such authority that people temporarily forget he is a blacksmith. He suggests willow bark tea for fever and pain. Another woman recommends a cool cloth. Someone else proposes a mustard plaster. Advice gathers quickly around sickness because doing nothing feels unbearable. An unusual remedy found in some 19th century medical guides involves placing sliced onions near a sick person, either on the chest, on the feet, or in the room, in the belief that they draw out illness. The treatment may provide a strong smell and a memorable evening, though its power against infection is less impressive. You choose the gentler measures. The child rests, drinks boiled water, and receives a damp cloth across the forehead. You watch for worsening fever, difficulty breathing, vomiting, or confusion. By midday, another problem appears. Your husband cuts his palm while adjusting a loose iron fitting. The wound is not deep, but dirt enters easily. He rinses it, presses the edges together, and wraps it with clean cloth. Clean is a relative term on the trail. Bandages are washed and boiled when possible. Needles used for sewing wounds may be heated in a flame, though understanding of infection remains incomplete. Alcohol, turpentine, or strong spirits sometimes serve as cleansing agents. Honey may be applied to wounds in certain households, a practice that sounds rustic but has some genuine protective qualities. Still, a small injury can become dangerous. Redness, swelling, fever, and foul drainage may signal infection, but options remain limited. There are no antibiotics. A family depends on cleaning, drainage, rest, luck, and the body's own ability to heal. Medical historians continue to debate how often emigrants benefited from their medicine chests rather than being harmed by them. Laudanum can reduce pain and diarrhea, yet it contains opium and can suppress breathing. Calomel, a mercury compound, is prescribed for many conditions despite its toxicity. Quinine can help with malaria, but not every fever is malaria. The same bottle may be useful in one moment and disastrous in another. The trail continues beneath a grey sky. You pass a place where several stones stand near the road. No names are visible from a distance, but everyone understands what they mark. The wagons grow quieter. When illness enters a company, fear travels with it. Families begin watching one another. A cough attracts attention. A child who refuses food becomes a source of whispered concern. People remass graves passed earlier and calculate how far they are from the next settlement. At camp, the sick child remains inside the wagon while supper is prepared outside. You make a thin broth from flour, salt, and a little dried meat. It is easy to swallow and uses little strength. The child manages several spoonfuls. That small success feels enormous. Nearby, another traveller is not improving. A man from the rear wagons has suffered stomach illness since morning. His family suspects bad water. He lies beneath a blanket while others dig a latrine farther from camp and downstream from where water is collected. Such precautions matter, though they are not always followed. Busy camps may leave waste too close to wells or rivers. Livestock enter the same water used for cooking. One contaminated source can spread disease through a train before anyone understands what has happened. You keep the children away from the sick man's camp. Cups are not shared. Hands are washed with a little soap and boiled water, an extravagance that suddenly seems entirely reasonable. Night falls. The child's fever rises again. You sit inside the wagon with a lantern turned low. Shadows move across the canvas. The air smells of damp wool, smoke, and peppermint tea. Outside, the camp settles, but you do not. You count breaths. You touch the small forehead. You listen for every cough. The baby shifts beside you, and your husband sleeps lightly near the wagon entrance, his bandaged hand resting across his chest. Hours pass without shape. Toward dawn, the fever begins to ease. The child's skin grows moist. Breathing becomes deeper and less hurried. A request for water comes in a weak voice, and you nearly laugh from relief. Morning light enters through the canvas in a pale glow. Nothing is certain. Fever may return. The man in the rear wagon may worsen. Your husband's hand must be watched. But for now, the child drinks and keeps the water down. The wagon train prepares to move once more. You fold the damp cloth, close the medicine box, and place it where it can be reached quickly. Illness has changed the interior again. It is no longer merely pantry and shelter. It has become a small moving sick room, carrying one fragile recovery over the next uncertain mile. By mid-morning, the fever has eased enough for the child to sit near the rear opening of the wagon. A blanket rests around narrow shoulders, and one hand grips the canvas flap whenever the wheels strike a rut. The face still looks pale, but curiosity has returned. That matters. On the trail, childhood does not pause for illness, distance, or adult anxiety. It simply reshapes itself around the wagon. A child learns to sleep beneath canvas, eat beside smoky fires, recognize animal tracks, and judge the mood of the sky. The road becomes schoolroom, playground, workplace, and warning. Your older child walks beside you, dragging a branch through the dust. The line it leaves bends around stones and wagon ruts, then vanishes beneath the next set of wheels. This private drawing may be the only mark the child makes today, but it is created with complete concentration. There is little room for ordinary toys. The wooden horse survived the first morning's packing, though many larger treasures remained behind. A few marbles, a rag doll, a ball of string, a carved whistle, or scraps of cloth can provide hours of entertainment. Children possess the useful ability to turn nearly anything into a game, including objects adults consider rubbish. A discarded hoop from a barrel becomes something to roll with a stick. Smooth stones become livestock, coins, soldiers, cakes, or family members. Feathers are collected. Bones are examined. Twigs build tiny corrals beside evening camps, often more orderly than the actual livestock enclosure. The familiar historical record shows that children made up a substantial part of many emigrant companies. Families travelled with infants, toddlers, adolescents, and nearly grown sons and daughters. Young people did not merely accompany the migration. Their labour helped keep it moving. The smallest children gather fuel near camp. Older ones fetch water, watch younger siblings, collect animals, prepare food, wash utensils, and help load bedding. A capable child may drive loose cattle or guide an ox team for short periods. Responsibility arrives early because every pair of hands is needed. This does not mean children perform each task cheerfully. Your child has been asked to gather dry fuel and returns with 3 useful sticks, 6 damp ones, a feather, a beetle, and a stone shaped vaguely like a potato. You admire the stone, reject the damp wood, and send the young collector back for another attempt. The response is a sigh so deep that future generations may still feel it. Lessons continue when time and energy allow. A parent may carry a Bible, primer, spelling book, slate, or arithmetic text. At noon rests or evening camps, children practice letters and numbers. Some keep diaries. Others read aloud to younger siblings while adults mend harnesses or prepare supper. Formal education becomes irregular. Rain delays it. Exhaustion cancels it. River crossings interrupt it. Yet the trail offers instruction of another kind. You ask a child to count the remaining sacks of flour. Another measures cornmeal for supper. Miles travelled become arithmetic. Rivers become geography. Plants, animals, weather, and rocks become natural history. Though no one uses such grand language while pulling a burr from a sock, one unusual amusement among young travellers is the collection of buffalo chips for contests. Children sometimes compete to gather the largest pile, the driest pieces, or the most impressive shape. A task involving dried dung becomes entertainment because boredom is a powerful creative force. The winner earns pride, perhaps praise, and the privilege of watching the collection burn beneath the supper pot. As the wagon moves, the children invent a game of spotting objects in the distance. A pale rock becomes a tent. A twisted branch resembles a person. A dark shape on the horizon might be an animal, a wagon, or merely another shrub pretending to be important. Their eyes often notice details adults miss. A child finds a patch of berries. Another sees that a calf has slipped away from the herd. One points toward birds circling above water before the experienced travellers notice them. The road also contains dangers that children do not fully understand. Wagon wheels can crush a careless foot. Animals may kick. Rivers pull strongly beneath calm surfaces. Snakes hide near rocks and grass. A child wandering beyond sight may become lost within minutes. Rules are repeated constantly. Stay near the wagons. Do not walk behind an animal. Do not drink from an unknown pool. Do not touch the medicine box. Do not climb beneath a moving wagon. Every instruction feels unnecessary until someone ignores it. During the afternoon, a shout rises from ahead. One small boy has fallen near a wheel. The driver stops the team in time and the child escapes with a scraped knee and a frightening lesson. His mother holds him tightly, then scolds him while crying. Everyone watches their own children more closely for the next mile. Researchers still differ over whether trail life made children unusually independent or simply placed adult burdens upon them too soon. Diaries written later often describe adventure, freedom, and wonder. Other accounts remember fear, hunger, relentless chores, and the loss of friends or siblings. Childhood on the trail can hold all of these things at once. Your recovering child asks to walk near sunset. You agree to a few careful steps. Small shoes touch the road. One hand holds yours. The pace is slow, but the child smiles at the grass bending beneath the evening wind. After sickness and hours inside the wagon, even dusty ground feels like freedom. At camp, the children are sent to gather fuel while adults arrange the wagons. Soon laughter rises from beyond the fire. Someone has found a frog near the stream. A circle forms around it, full of whispered theories and urgent advice. The frog eventually escapes, perhaps the wisest traveller in the company. Supper is followed by a few moments of play. A string is stretched between two wagon wheels for a simple jumping game. Older children tell riddles. A girl from another family sings a song learned at home. The words drift across the camp, softening the sound of cookware and animals. Then the work returns, hands and faces are wiped. Torn clothing is examined, blisters receive cloth coverings. The recovering child takes another spoonful of broth and does not protest. Before bed, you open the Bible and read a short passage by lantern light. The children lean against bedding and sacks. One listens closely, another fights sleep. The baby has already surrendered. Beyond the canvas, stars brighten over the trail. Inside, the tiny wagon holds warm bodies, dusty shoes, a rag doll, one wooden horse, and several treasures that look like stones until children gave them meaning. You watch them settle into narrow spaces among the cargo. Their lives have become smaller in comfort and larger in distance. They miss beds, friends, gardens, and familiar rooms. Yet they also know the names of oxen, the smell of approaching rain, and the quiet sound a wagon makes when everyone inside is asleep. Tomorrow they will walk, gather, count, carry, complain, laugh, and grow a little older before the wheels stop again. The children sleep close together among the bedding, their knees tucked beneath the quilt and their dusty shoes placed near the rear flap. You watch them for a moment, listening to the soft changes in their breathing, and then become aware of just how many other people are breathing nearby. Your husband lies beneath the wagon, only an arm's length away. Another family camps beyond the nearest wheel. Their voices pass easily through the darkness. Someone coughs. Someone turns over on a squeaking bedroll. A baby wakes 3 wagons down, and within seconds half the camp knows about it. Privacy, once taken for granted, has become a scarce possession. At home, a closed door creates a boundary. On the trail, the closest thing to a door is a canvas flap that lifts whenever the wind feels curious. The wagon walls hide shapes, but not sounds. Every disagreement, lullaby, whispered worry, and stomach complaint enters the common air. Morning makes the problem even clearer. You wake before sunrise and need to change clothing that is damp from yesterday's walking. There is no bedroom, dressing screen, or quiet corner. You hang a blanket from the wagon side, securing it between the canvas frame and a nearby tree branch. For several hopeful moments, it forms a private enclosure. Then the wind catches it. The blanket rises like a theatre curtain, just as you are pulling a clean dress over your shoulders. You seize the edge and glare toward the camp. Everyone suddenly becomes deeply interested in boots, fires, animals, and the horizon. Trail manners often depend upon the polite agreement that nobody has seen what everybody has clearly seen. One ordinary truth of emigrant life is that families often slept outdoors, beneath wagons, inside tents, or wherever a reasonably dry patch of ground could be found. The wagon interior was commonly reserved for supplies and for travellers who were sick, very young, injured, or unable to walk. There was rarely enough space for an entire household to sleep comfortably inside. Comfort itself has been redefined. A blanket spread over level earth now feels generous. A place without stones becomes desirable. A night without rain seems almost luxurious. When you sleep beneath the wagon, the wooden bed overhead offers some protection from dew, but wheels, cargo, and family bodies limit every movement. You learn to turn carefully. Stretching one leg may kick a box. Sitting up too quickly may meet an axle. Rolling toward your husband may place your face against a boot. Marriage on the trail develops its own quiet choreography. There is affection, but little seclusion. A hand squeezed while walking may carry more tenderness than an embrace beside a crowded fire. Conversations happen in fragments while gathering water or checking the animals. Serious worries are discussed after the children sleep, in voices low enough to be mistaken for the wind. Even then, someone nearby may hear. Arguments are harder to hide. Fatigue sharpens small frustrations. A misplaced spoon becomes evidence of irresponsibility. A poorly tied barrel suggests moral decline. One person believes the train should have stopped earlier. Another remembers saying exactly that, repeatedly and with great wisdom. You and your husband disagree over the sugar. The supply is shrinking faster than expected. He insists that coffee without enough sugar is a punishment. You remind him that hunger in the mountains may also qualify as a punishment. The conversation remains soft because the children are nearby, but each word is placed with great care. Finally, the sugar ration is reduced. Your husband drinks the next morning's coffee with the expression of a man personally betrayed by westward expansion. A less familiar camp custom involves families creating temporary bathing spaces with quilts, wagon covers, or several people standing watch. Washing may occur beside a stream in shifts, with women and men using different stretches of water or different times of day. The arrangement depends upon modesty, terrain, weather, and the willingness of children to remain where they are told. Children naturally are unreliable guardians of privacy. When you take them to the water for washing, they splash, shout, and report observations at full volume. Soap is precious, so only a little is used. Clothes are scrubbed against stones or rubbed by hand, then spread over bushes and wagon ropes to dry. A proper bath is rare. More often you wipe dust from your face, neck, hands, and feet with a damp cloth. Hair is combed carefully, partly for appearance and partly to search for lice. Clothing is shaken and aired. Bedding is placed in sunlight when possible. Cleanliness matters, but water, time, and privacy all compete against it. Social historians remain divided on how strictly trail communities maintained familiar rules of modesty. Some accounts emphasize careful separation and elaborate courtesy. Others describe circumstances in which illness, childbirth, river crossings, and severe weather made those customs impossible. The evidence suggests that people preserved dignity where they could and adapted when they could not. Childbirth is the most demanding example. Pregnant women travel with many companies, walking, cooking, and working until labour begins. When the time comes, wagons may halt, or the family may remain behind with a few helpers. Blankets form screens. Experienced women gather water, cloth, and whatever medical supplies exist. Men and children are sent away, though not always far enough to avoid hearing everything. A woman in your company is nearing her time. Her name is Margaret, and she's been moving more slowly for days. This evening, as camp settles near a riverbank, labour begins. The news passes quietly from one woman to another. A space is cleared inside her wagon. Supplies are removed and stacked beneath a canvas sheet. Bedding is arranged. Water is heated. You are asked to help. Inside the wagon, the air is warm and close. A lantern burns low. Margaret grips your hand while another woman speaks calmly beside her. The wagon creaks whenever someone shifts. Outside, camp noises continue with strange normality. Ox bells sound, A pot lid falls. Children are told to stay near the fire. Hours pass. There is pain, fear, whispered encouragement, and long stretches of waiting. No physician arrives. Experience must serve. At last, near dawn, a newborn cry rises beneath the canvas. The sound travels across the camp. People pause, smile, and then respectfully return to their tasks. The baby is wrapped in clean cloth and placed against Margaret. Exhaustion softens her face. By morning, the wagon train is preparing to move again, but Margaret's family remains behind for several hours with 2 other wagons. The rest continue slowly, expecting them to rejoin when she is strong enough. You think about the newborn entering the world inside a freight wagon, surrounded by flour sacks, iron pots, and the smell of canvas. There is almost no privacy, yet there is community. Strangers share water, labour, blankets, and knowledge, because no family can manage every crisis alone. That evening, your own household settles beneath the wagon once more. The children argue over space. The baby fusses. Your husband searches for his blanket and discovers that he is sitting on it. Nothing is private. Every habit is visible. Every weakness is noticed. Yet closeness has another side. You hear when someone is ill. You know when a neighbour needs help. A quiet sob in the darkness does not remain unanswered for long. You lie beside your family while canvas rustles overhead. There are no walls, only shared shadows, low voices, and the warm pressure of familiar bodies. For now, dignity survives not through solitude, but through kindness, restraint, and the gentle pretense that a hanging blanket is as solid as any locked door. The river appears before you hear it. At first, it is only a silver line beyond the grass, bright beneath the morning sun. Then the ground begins to slope. Cottonwoods gather along the bank, and a low rushing sound rises beneath the creak of wheels. The wagon train slows. Everyone knows that rivers divide the journey into 2 kinds of days. There are ordinary days of dust, walking, cooking, and repair. Then there are crossing days, when every possession, every animal, and every person must be carried from one uncertain bank to another. You reach the edge and stare at the current. The water is wider than expected. It moves steadily, folding around dark stones and carrying branches downstream. Near the bank, it looks shallow enough to wade. Farther out, the surface darkens. Nobody can see the bottom. A rider enters first on horseback to test the depth. The animal steps carefully, water climbing from hoof to knee, then to belly. The rider turns back before reaching the centre, too deep for a simple ford. The news passes along the wagons. Some families sigh, others begin unloading without waiting for instructions. Everyone has heard stories of crossings that ended with overturned wagons, drowned animals, lost food, and families stranded on opposite banks. A basic reality of overland migration is that major rivers often required ferries, rafts, temporary boats, or carefully prepared wagon beds. Smaller streams might be forded directly, but depth, current, weather, and the condition of the riverbed could transform an ordinary crossing into the most dangerous work of the week. The company captain walks along the bank with several experienced men. They study possible entry points, watch floating debris, and inspect the opposite shore. A good crossing needs more than shallow water. The bank must allow heavy wagons to descend and climb again without overturning. You remain beside your wagon, listening to opinions multiply. One traveller believes the current is manageable. Another insists it will rise by afternoon. A third says he crossed a worse river 2 years ago, though nobody is entirely certain he crossed the same river or even travelled west. Eventually, a ferry is discovered farther upstream. It consists of a broad wooden platform supported by boats and guided by ropes stretched across the water. The ferryman names his price. The amount produces immediate outrage. Crossing fees often rise when rivers are swollen or traffic is heavy. Ferrymen understand that travellers have limited choices. Bargaining begins, voices sharpen, and several families consider building their own raft. You look at the racing water and decide that paying an irritating man may be preferable to becoming part of a cautionary tale. Not every wagon can cross fully loaded. The ferryman orders heavy goods removed, and the bank becomes a confusion of barrels, sacks, tools, bedding, children, and livestock. For the first time since departure, the entire hidden structure of your household lies exposed beneath the open sky. Flour sacks are carried to dry ground. The medicine box is placed above them. Bedding is bundled tightly. The coffee pot receives special attention, partly because it contains the blue cup, and partly because nobody wishes to face tomorrow without coffee after surviving a river. The wagon bed must be prepared against splashing water. Cracks are stuffed with cloth. Seams may be coated with grease, tar, or wax. Some travellers attempt to float wagon bodies across deep water by removing wheels and sealing the box like a crude boat. One strange technique involves tying inflated animal hides, empty barrels, or bundles of reeds beneath a wagon bed to increase buoyancy. The arrangement looks like a barn attempting to become a fish. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it inspires a vivid diary entry. Your company chooses the ferry. The oxen will not ride on the platform with the wagon. They must swim or be guided through a shallower section. Ropes are attached. Skilled handlers position themselves upstream and downstream. The animals hesitate at the water, lowering their heads and testing the edge with cautious hooves. One ox refuses entirely. He plants all 4 feet in the mud and becomes a monument to personal boundaries. Drivers call, pull, push, and offer grass. Nothing changes. At last another ox is led into the river beside him. The reluctant animal follows, not because humans have persuaded him, but because he refuses to let another ox make an important decision alone. The team enters the current. Water rises around their shoulders. Their heads remain above the surface, horns tilting as they swim. The ropes tighten. For several seconds the current carries them downstream. Everyone on the bank holds still. Then the handlers guide them toward the opposite shore. Hooves touch gravel. The animals climb, dripping and exhausted onto solid ground. Your wagon is rolled onto the ferry platform. The wheels are blocked. Ropes secure the frame. You're told to cross separately in a small boat with the children, but your husband remains beside the wagon to steady it. The ferry pushes away from the bank. Wood groans beneath the load. Water slaps against the boats below. The guiding rope hums with tension as the current presses sideways. From the small passenger boat, you watch your wagon drift into the middle of the river. It looks fragile there, stripped of much of its cargo, the white canvas lifting in the wind. That narrow wooden box has carried your home across plains and storms. Now it appears no larger than a toy. Researchers continue to disagree about whether river crossings were remembered as more dangerous than they statistically were because they produced such vivid moments of fear. Many crossings ended safely, yet even a successful passage involved real risk, and travellers had little control once a wagon entered deep, moving water. Halfway across, the ferry jerks. One securing rope slips against the wagon wheel. The rear of the vehicle shifts several inches toward the edge. Your husband lunges for the frame. The ferryman shouts. Another man tightens the rope while the platform tilts slightly beneath them. The children grip your sleeves. For one long moment nothing moves except the river. Then the wagon settles back against its blocks. The ferry continues. You release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The opposite bank approaches slowly. Men waiting there catch guide ropes and pull the platform into position. Planks are laid across the gap. The wagon rolls onto shore with a heavy wooden thump. Only then do you allow yourself to smile. The work is not finished. Every sack, barrel, blanket, tool, and cooking pot must be carried across. Several trips follow. Each load costs time and money. The sun climbs higher. Mud coats shoes. Children become tired and hungry. By late afternoon, the household has been rebuilt inside the wagon. Flour returns to its dry corner. Tools are secured. Bedding is wedged into place. The medicine box remains accessible. The blue cup survives. The animals graze nearby, still damp along their bellies. One ox has a small cut from the river stone, so you wash it and watch for swelling. Across the water, more wagons wait their turn. Voices drift from the far bank. A family may not cross until tomorrow, dividing the company for the night. You stand beside your wagon and look back at the river. From this side, it seems narrower. Safe ground has a way of reducing danger after the fact. Camp forms above the bank, where the soil is dry. Fires are lit. Wet ropes are spread over bushes. Supper is prepared in weary silence. As darkness gathers, the river continues moving below, smooth and indifferent. It carries leaves, foam, and broken branches past the place where your wagon nearly slipped. Tomorrow, the road will begin climbing again. Tonight, you rest with the sound of water beneath the stars, grateful that every person, animal, sack, and fragile cup has reached the same shore. Morning finds the wagon standing slightly crooked. At first, the tilt is so small that you blame the uneven ground. Then your husband walks around the rear wheel, crouches, and remains silent longer than usual. Silence around wagon parts is rarely comforting. You join him beside the wheel. A narrow crack runs through one of the wooden spokes. It begins near the hub and stretches outward like a dark vein. The damage may have started during the river crossing, when the wagon shifted on the ferry. It may have deepened in yesterday's rough ground. Whatever its cause, the spoke now carries less weight than it should. The wagon cannot simply be driven onward and politely asked not to notice. Everything carried inside presses downward through the axles, hubs, spokes, and rims. A single weakness can spread. One cracked spoke places extra strain on the others. A damaged wheel may wobble, loosen its iron tire, split its hub, or collapse beneath the load. The company captain allows a short halt, though several wagons continue slowly ahead. Repairs must begin at once. You unload part of the cargo to reduce pressure. Flour sacks come out first, followed by tools, bedding, and the bacon barrel. The familiar household appears once again beside the road, looking less like a home than the contents of a shop after a small earthquake. The wagon is raised with a wooden lever and blocks. There is no neat iron jack waiting beneath the seat. Strong poles, stones, spare timber, and coordinated lifting must do the work. Several adults push while your husband wedges a block beneath the axle. The wheel comes free with a groan. A central fact of wagon travel is that emigrants carried spare parts and repair materials because professional help could be days or weeks away. Extra spokes, sections of axle wood, iron bolts, leather straps, rope, nails, and pieces of timber might determine whether a family continued or abandoned its wagon. A complete spare wheel is useful but heavy. Many families carry separate components instead. Others rely on materials found along the trail, hoping the landscape provides a suitable tree at the exact moment human planning fails. Today, fortune offers a spare spoke tied beneath another wagon. It does not fit perfectly. Nothing repaired on the trail ever seems to fit perfectly. The damaged spoke must be cut away without harming the hub. The replacement is trimmed with a saw and shaped using a draw knife. Wood shavings curl onto the ground. Measurements are taken by eye, then checked, then taken again after someone points out that the first measurement was made from the wrong edge. The children watch for several minutes before deciding that wheel repair contains less excitement than promised. They are sent to gather small pieces of wood and return with an assortment that includes one useful branch and several decorative weeds. The replacement spoke is driven into place. Its outer end must align with the wooden rim sections, called felloes, that form the circle beneath the iron tire. Even a slight mismatch can make the wheel turn unevenly. Your husband taps the wood, listens, adjusts it, and taps again. One curious emergency method uses wet rawhide wrapped tightly around a cracked part. As the hide dries, It shrinks and grips the wood like a strong natural clamp. Rawhide can reinforce spokes, bind a split tongue, or hold a temporary axle repair. It is not elegant, but elegance has not pushed a wagon through mud recently. The repair requires more than wood. The iron tyre around the wheel is loosened. Dry weather can shrink the wooden rim, allowing the metal band to slip. Wheelwrights normally heat the tyre, fit it over the wood, and cool it so the contracting iron grips tightly. On the open trail, travellers sometimes soak the wheel in water to swell the wood or hammer wedges beneath the tyre. The wheel is carried toward a shallow pool near the riverbank and laid partly in the water. It rests there while other damage is inspected. The axle is sound but dry. The jar of fat and graphite appears again, respected now like an elderly relative who has repeatedly saved the family. Grease is worked around the spindle where the hub turns. Too little lubrication creates heat and friction. Too much attracts dust and grit, forming a grinding paste capable of wearing down the wood. You wipe away the old black mixture before adding fresh grease. The smell is smoky, heavy, and familiar. Months ago it seemed unpleasant. Now it smells like continued movement. Specialists in migration history still disagree about how many wagons were abandoned because of true mechanical failure, rather than overloaded teams, exhausted animals, or deliberate decisions to lighten the journey. Broken vehicles certainly littered parts of the routes, but an abandoned wagon could represent many stories. Sometimes a family transferred its supplies to another vehicle. Sometimes the animals could no longer pull. Sometimes repairing the wagon cost more time than the company could spare. Your family does not intend to leave this one behind. While the wheel soaks, attention turns to smaller failures. A harness strap has begun to split near a buckle. You carry it to the shade and open the sewing kit. Thick leather does not welcome an ordinary needle, so an awl is used to pierce new holes. Waxed thread passes through them. A narrow piece of spare leather reinforces the weak place. Nearby, a kettle handle is loosened. A child's shoe sole is separating. The canvas tear made by hail still needs another patch. Once repair begins, every object seems inspired to reveal its private weakness. The kettle is fixed with a piece of wire. The shoe receives small nails and careful stitching. The canvas is drawn flat, and a patch is sewn over the damaged area using tight stitches designed to resist wind and rain. You work slowly because material cannot be wasted. Thread has value, leather has value. A bent nail is straightened against a stone rather than discarded. Broken crate boards become braces, kindling, handles, or wedges. Nothing is merely broken until every possible new purpose has been considered. By midday, the wheel is lifted from the water. The wood has swollen slightly, tightening the iron tyre. The replacement spoke is checked again. Rawhide is wrapped around the most vulnerable joint as additional insurance. The wheel returns to the axle. Several people lift while another guides the hub into place. The retaining pin is inserted. The wagon is lowered from its blocks 1 careful inch at a time. Then comes the test. Your husband pushes against the side, the wagon rocks, the wheel holds. He leads the oxen forward slowly. The repaired wheel turns once, twice, then several times. There is a slight unevenness, but no dangerous wobble. Relief moves through you so quietly that it feels like warmth. Cargo must be reloaded. The flour sacks return low and central. The tools are secured where they can be reached. Bedding fills the gaps. The blue cup, still wrapped within the coffee pot, continues its improbable career as the most protected object west of the river. The company has lost several hours. The wagons that remained behind form a smaller group and move quickly to rejoin the others. Every unusual noise now draws attention. A squeak from the repaired wheel makes your husband stop. He inspects it. Nothing is wrong. Half a mile later, a wooden knock causes another halt. This time a loose shovel handle is striking a box. By afternoon, everyone is listening to the wagon with the concentration of physicians around a difficult patient. Every creak has meaning. Every rattle demands interpretation. Yet the wheel continues turning. As evening approaches, the main company appears ahead, camped beside a line of trees. Children run out to greet the delayed wagons. Questions are asked. The repair is inspected by several men who offer opinions after the work is complete, which is often the safest moment to possess expertise. You settle near the fire and look back at the patched canvas, tightened harness, mended shoe, wired kettle, and repaired spoke. The wagon is no longer the clean vehicle that left home. It is a collection of original parts, replacements, knots, stains, patches, and improvisations. It survives because many hands continue persuading it to remain whole. Tomorrow the road begins rising toward harsher ground. Wheels will strike stone, axles will carry greater strain, animals will pull against steeper slopes. Tonight, however, the repaired spoke rests beneath the weight. The rawhide tightens as it dries, and the tiny home stands upright once more. The road rises so gradually that you barely notice it. Grass gives way to rough ground. Trees gather along the slopes. The horizon, once broad and distant, folds into ridges of stone and dark timber. By noon, the wagon no longer rolls with its old rhythm. The oxen lean harder into their yokes. Chains draw tight. Each wheel pauses against rocks before climbing over them with a deep wooden knock. You walk beside the team and feel the change in your breathing. The air is cooler, yet every step requires more effort. The road bends upward through a narrow valley toward a pass that still seems impossibly high. The mountains do not care how far you have travelled. They place steep ground beneath the wagon and wait to see what your family will surrender. At the first serious grade, the company halts. Drivers check yokes, chains, wheels, and harness. Loose cargo is retied. Every person able to walk leaves the wagons. The animals must pull the wooden bodies, food, tools, and remaining possessions upward without wasting strength on passengers. A well-documented practice on the western trails was unloading heavy goods before difficult climbs. Families carried boxes, barrels, and bedding by hand, then returned for whatever remained. In extreme cases, teams made several trips over one steep stretch. You lift a flour sack with your husband. It is lighter than when the journey began, which brings relief and worry together. The children take smaller bundles. One carries the sewing kit with such seriousness that it might contain the national treasury. The wagon begins climbing almost empty. The oxen lower their heads. A driver calls familiar commands. The wheels strike loose stones, sending them bouncing down the slope. Several people push from behind, palms flat against the rear boards. You push too. Your shoes slide on gravel. The wagon moves a few feet, then stops. The animals breathe heavily, steam lifting from their nostrils in the cold air. Again the command comes. Chains tighten. Wood creaks. The wagon rises another yard. A stone wedged beneath the rear wheel keeps it from rolling backward while the animals recover. One curious mountain technique involves fastening a rope to the front and having people pull from higher ground while others push below. The arrangement resembles a tired human spider dragging a cupboard uphill. The grade eases near a shelf of level ground. The wagon reaches it, and the oxen stand trembling, sides heaving. You remove the yoke and inspect their necks. Red skin beneath the wood can become an open sore, and an injured team may be unable to continue. You rub grease along a tender place and adjust the padding. The oxen lower their heads towards sparse grass, more interested in food than praise. Now the cargo must be carried upward. You descend on aching legs and retrieve flour, bedding, tools, and the medicine box. Each return climb feels steeper than the last. By the time everything is loaded again, the company has travelled only a short distance. Migration scholars remain divided over whether emigrants underestimated mountain travel because guidebooks described mileage more clearly than elevation. Some diaries show surprise at the severity of climbs. Others reveal careful planning. What is certain is that a mile on level prairie and a mile on broken mountain road are not the same experience, whatever the map suggests. The air thins as the road rises, breathing becomes faster, nights grow colder. Snow remains in shadowed hollows even though the season below still feels like late summer. The children discover ice beside a stream and touch it with delighted fingers. Their excitement lasts until wind crosses the pass and cuts through damp sleeves. You bring out heavier clothing. Wool blankets return to easy reach. The same canvas that trapped heat on the plains now offers too little protection against cold. Camp is made early among pine trees. Resin and wood smoke fill the air. For once, fuel is abundant. Branches crack brightly in the fire, and everyone gathers close while beans simmer. Morning brings frost across the wagon cover. The oxen face another climb. Their pace is slower. One animal has developed a raw patch beneath the yoke despite yesterday's care. You pad it with folded cloth and shift the load. Then the trail begins descending. At first this seems easier. It is not. A loaded wagon on a steep decline wants to move faster than the animals. Without control, it can run into the team, overturn or drag everyone down the slope. Wheels must be slowed, locked, or restrained. Your husband attaches a chain around one rear wheel, so it cannot turn freely. The wheel slides instead, scraping a dark line through the dirt. On sharper sections, a rope is tied to the rear and wrapped around a tree or held by several people above. Every knot is checked twice. You lead the children away from the track. The oxen begin downhill. The locked wheel grinds over stones. The wagon presses forward against the team. The rope behind tightens. Men brace their boots and feed it out slowly. The wagon slips, jerks, then settles. You hear the replacement spoke creak. Everyone stops. Your husband inspects the wheel. The rawhide binding remains firm. The iron tire is tight. Nothing is broken. The descent continues. Loose stones roll beneath the sliding wheel. The wagon tilts toward the outer edge of the trail, where the slope falls into trees and rock. You resist the urge to call instructions to people already doing everything possible. At the narrowest bend, the front wheels angle and the rear swings outward. For one breath, the uphill wheel lifts from the ground. The rope catches the weight. The wheel drops back with a hard thump. No one speaks until the wagon reaches a wider stretch below. The oxen rest. The chains are removed. The sliding wheel bears a flattened patch along its iron rim, but it still turns. Your husband touches the hub and listens to the axle, as though it might confess future intentions. The children approach slowly. One asks whether the worst part is finished. An experienced guide laughs softly. There are more passes ahead. That evening, the trail offers a view westward. Valleys unfold in blue layers beneath the sinking sun. Somewhere past them lies the destination that has pulled your family through heat, illness, rivers, and mud. But winter is moving too. Thin snowflakes appear after dark, drifting through firelight and melting on the wagon boards. They are few, almost beautiful. Yet every adult watches them with the same expression. The season is closing. Food is lower. Animals are weaker. Mountain miles consume entire days. The wagon carries less than before, but each remaining object feels heavier. You wrap the quilt around the children and look toward the pass behind you. The tiny wagon stands among the pines, patched canvas silver beneath the moon. Tomorrow you will lighten it again. You already know what that means. The snow disappears by morning, leaving only beads of water on the canvas and a pale crust along the shaded ground. You pack in silence, still thinking about the possessions that may soon have to remain beside the trail. Before any decision is made, however, voices drift through the trees. They are unfamiliar voices. The company slows as several riders appear on the road ahead. For a moment, every traveller becomes alert. Hands tighten around reins. Children are called closer. The riders wear a mixture of buckskin, wool, and weathered hats. One carries a long rifle across his saddle. They turn out to be traders returning east. Relief spreads through the wagons, though caution remains. Strangers on the trail can bring information, supplies, opportunity, confusion, or trouble. Often they bring several of these at once. The riders stop beside the captain and exchange news. A difficult descent lies ahead. Grass is scarce near the next river. A trading post farther west has flour, but its prices are high. Snow has already touched the upper passes. Every person listens. Information has become a form of currency. A reliable warning may save an animal. A rumour may send an entire company toward a poor crossing. Travellers must decide whom to trust, and confidence is not always the same as accuracy. One trader claims he knows a shorter route. Several men immediately become interested. Shorter routes possess a powerful charm, particularly after months of walking. They also have a habit of becoming longer routes with fewer trees and worse water. The captain asks careful questions. Has the trader used it recently? Are wagons able to pass? Is there grass? How steep is the descent? The answers become less certain with each question. The company remains on the known road. Encounters like this are part of the ordinary fabric of overland migration. Emigrants did not move through an empty continent. They crossed established indigenous homelands, trading networks, military roads, mission routes, and territories used by hunters, merchants, soldiers, and earlier settlers. The trail was crowded in some seasons, especially near rivers, forts, and mountain passes. Later that day, smoke rises beyond a bend. You expect another emigrant camp, but the wagons approach a small trading station built of logs and earth. A rough stockade surrounds several structures. Horses stand near a corral. The smell of hides, wood smoke, animals, and frying meat hangs in the cold air. The children stare as though a city has appeared. Inside the post, shelves hold cloth, tools, powder, coffee, tobacco, needles, dried food, and objects whose usefulness is unclear but whose prices are impressive. The trader behind the counter studies every customer with the calm attention of someone who knows the nearest competing shop is several days away. You ask about flour. The price makes your husband cough. The trader does not lower it. Coffee costs even more. Sugar has become almost ceremonial. A small bag of salt requires careful thought. Families gather outside to decide what they can exchange. Money is scarce. Some offer tools, spare clothing, livestock, watches, or household goods. A woman trades a silver brooch for food. A man sells a rifle he has carried since departure, keeping only a smaller weapon. You unwrap the blue cup. For several moments you hold it in both hands. Its glaze is still bright. Not a single crack crosses the surface. It has survived jolting roads, heat, rain, hail, mud, sickness, a river crossing, and the dangerous descent from the pass. The trader offers very little for it. You wrap it again. There are limits, even now. Instead, you trade a spare tablecloth and one heavy candlestick for flour, salt, and a small measure of coffee. The exchange feels unfair because it is unfair. Yet the supplies may keep the family moving, while the candlestick cannot be boiled into supper despite its respectable appearance. A curious detail from frontier trading posts is that objects could change value completely depending on location. A needle might be nearly worthless in a settled town, but precious on the trail. A decorative clock might command admiration and no practical offer at all. A sound mule, meanwhile, could inspire negotiations of almost spiritual intensity. Near the corral, indigenous traders arrive with horses, dressed hides, food, and handmade goods. Their presence makes some emigrants nervous, largely because fear and rumour have travelled farther than experience. The meeting remains calm. Communication takes place through a mixture of English words, trade language, gestures, and interpretation. Dried meat is offered. Moccasins are examined. A guide discusses the next stretch of road with the captain, tracing the route in the dirt with a stick. You watch carefully. The people before you know this country in ways your family does not. They understand seasonal water, animal movement, weather signs, and passes used long before wagons arrived. Yet the exchange takes place beneath the shadow of expanding settlement, broken agreements, military pressure, and diseases carried into native communities. Nothing about the meeting is simple. Some historians question how much peaceful cooperation between emigrants and indigenous nations has been overlooked because later popular stories focused on conflict. Trail diaries contain fear and prejudice, but they also record trade, guidance, rescue, shared food, and ordinary conversation. The pattern differs by region, year, and circumstance, resisting any single comfortable version. A missionary couple at the post invites several families to share a meal. Their cabin is small, but it contains a table, shelves, and a real door. You nearly admire the door more than the food. The missionaries speak about settlements farther west. They describe farms, schools, churches, and fertile valleys. Their account sounds hopeful, though they also mention sickness and difficult winters. A soldier stationed nearby offers a different view. He warns of stolen livestock and advises the company to post a stronger night watch. His stories grow more dramatic as the evening continues. By the third telling, almost every shadow contains a thief. You listen, but you also remember the confident trader and his shorter route. Not every warning deserves equal weight. That night, the company camps outside the post. Wagons stand close together. Animals are secured carefully. Watches are assigned. A group of emigrants from another company joins the fires. They have lost 2 wagons to broken axles and several animals to exhaustion. Their faces appear older than the season. Stories move between the camps. You hear about a river ferry that collapsed, a child born during a storm, a man who carried a piano until the first mountain grade, and a woman who walked 300 miles with a parrot in a wooden cage. The parrot, according to the story, learned to imitate ox commands and caused considerable confusion until someone covered the cage whenever the teams were yoked. Whether every detail is true hardly matters. Laughter rises around the fire, gentle and tired. For a few minutes, strangers become companions through shared absurdity. The next morning brings farewells. The traders ride east. The other wagon company rests another day. The indigenous guide travels with your group for several miles, pointing out a safer descent and a spring hidden beyond a ridge. At the place where he turns back, the captain pays him in food and cloth. Hands are raised in parting. Then distance opens again. You walk beside the wagon, thinking of all the people who have crossed your path. Ferrymen, blacksmiths, mothers, soldiers, missionaries, children, guides, merchants, and travellers going the opposite way. The frontier is not empty. It is layered with lives, claims, memories, and intentions. Behind you, the trading post disappears among the trees. Ahead, the road narrows into the valley. Inside the wagon, the new flour rests beside the remaining stores. The coffee is guarded carefully. The blue cup remains wrapped in darkness, still useless, still cherished, and still moving west. The new flour does not make the wagon feel abundant. It simply makes the emptiness around it more obvious. When you lift the rear flap that morning, you see spaces where full sacks once pressed against one another. The bacon barrel is light enough to move with one hand. The sugar bag folds almost flat. Coffee remains, but only because everyone has agreed to brew it weekly and complain with restraint. The wagon itself rides higher on its springs, though it has no springs, which is an important detail your back remembers whenever a wheel finds a stone. Less weight should make travel easier. Instead, the empty spaces seem to whisper how far you have come and how much remains uncertain. You measure flour into a bowl. The scoop scrapes against the bottom of the sack. That sound stops conversation. There is still food, but each meal now belongs partly to the future. A large biscuit today may mean a smaller portion near the final pass. An extra spoonful of beans can become an evening of hunger later. Generosity, once a virtue, begins to require arithmetic. The family eats slowly. The children have learned not to ask whether there is more. They watch your hands instead. When you divide bread, their eyes follow the knife. You make the pieces as equal as possible, though one is slightly larger and quietly placed before the recovering child. Your husband notices. He says nothing. The road descends through dry country where grass appears in scattered patches. The oxen pull with less strength than before. Their hips show more clearly beneath dusty hides. One animal pauses frequently, lowering its head as though the earth itself has become heavy. This is not unusual near the end of a long overland journey. Draft animals often arrived thin, lame, or exhausted after months of work. Some died from poor forage, disease, injury, thirst, or overwork. Others were traded, abandoned, or replaced when families had enough money and happened to find another team. Your family has little money left. At each camp, the children search for grass while adults lead the oxen toward any promising hollow. The animals crop plants almost to the ground. They chew slowly through the evening, yet their sides remain hollow. You reduce the wagon load again. The decision begins with tools. 2 shovels remain, though one is enough. A heavy iron chain has proven useful, but there are lighter ropes. A wooden chest contains clothing no longer suited to the season. Each object is placed on the ground. The shovel is traded to another family whose blade broke. In exchange, you receive a little dried meat. The iron chain is left beside the road with a note scratched onto a board, offering it to whoever may need it. The chest is emptied, and its contents are rolled into bedding. Then comes the chest itself. It stood in your bedroom at home. Your mother once folded linens into it. The children hid inside it during games. Now it sits beside the trail, lid open, smelling faintly of cedar and dust. You touch the worn edge, then you walk away. Abandoned possessions have become common along the route. Broken furniture, trunks, tools, books, clothing, stoves, and wagon parts appear beside difficult stretches. Later travellers sometimes take what they can use. Other objects remain until weather reduces them to iron, scraps, and stories. One especially odd account describes emigrants leaving behind a large mirror, only for later travellers to find livestock startled by their reflections. The mirror eventually broke, spreading bright fragments beside the road. Even vanity, it seems, can become a minor hazard to cattle. By midday the wagon moves more easily. The oxen gain a little speed. You do not feel relieved. The landscape holds reminders of other families making the same choices. A cast-iron stove lies half-buried near a slope. Several books have swollen from rain. A child's chair rests upside down in the grass. Nobody stops to examine it closely. The children grow quieter as the day continues. They understand that belongings can disappear. They begin checking their small treasures without being asked. The wooden horse remains inside a pocket. The rag doll is carried rather than left among the bedding. At the evening camp, supper consists of thin bean soup and bread. A strip of dried meat is cut into pieces small enough to flavour the pot without becoming the meal itself. Smoke rises straight into the cold air. Your husband studies the provisions after dark. He counts days, then miles, then days again. The destination should be close, yet mountain travel has made every estimate unreliable. Researchers remain at odds over how often emigrants truly face starvation during final stages of the trail. Many arrived with food remaining, while others suffered severe shortages after delays, wrong turns, animal loss, or early snow. Diaries sometimes use the language of starvation for very small rations, though even reduced meals could weaken travellers rapidly after months of labour. Whether the word is precise matters less when your stomach aches. The next morning the company encounters another steep rise. Several teams cannot manage their wagons without help. Families combine oxen, pulling one vehicle upward at a time. Your animals are harnessed beside another pair. 4 oxen lean together while people push from behind. The wagon climbs slowly. At the top, one ox collapses to its knees. Everyone rushes forward. The yoke is removed. Water is offered in small amounts. The animal lies on its side, breathing heavily. You stroke the dusty hide and feel heat beneath your palm. For nearly an hour, the train waits. At last, the ox lifts its head. Then it struggles upright. A cheer rises, soft but genuine. The animal cannot pull again that day. Part of the load must be transferred among other wagons. Every family already carries too much, yet small spaces are found. Your flour goes into a neighbour's wagon. The medicine box travels with another. Bedding is divided. For the first time, the household no longer fits beneath one canvas cover. Dependence becomes visible. No family survives entirely alone. Pride has no useful weight allowance. The weakened ox walks without the yoke while the remaining team pulls the lighter wagon. Progress is slow. The road stretches through grey afternoon light. Tempers fray. One child begins crying from hunger and tiredness. Your husband speaks sharply when a rope comes loose. You answer more sharply than intended. For several minutes, neither of you speaks. Then he hands you the last piece of dried apple from his pocket. You divide it with him. The argument dissolves without apology. That night snow begins again. It falls in small dry flakes that gather along wagon wheels and blanket edges. The company makes camp earlier than planned. Fires are built high. Animals are brought close. You prepare the final portion of coffee. The grounds are used twice. The drink is pale, smoky, and barely recognizable, but it warms your hands through the cup. The blue cup is still wrapped inside the pot. You consider taking it out. Not yet. Some things remain protected because they're useful. Others survive because losing them would feel like losing the person who began the journey. The children sleep near the fire, wrapped in the old family quilt. Your husband checks the oxen once more. The weak animal stands with its head low but steady. Beyond the camp, the road disappears beneath a thin covering of snow. The promised destination is close. Everyone says so. The words have been repeated for days, perhaps because hope also needs rationing. You lie beneath the wagon and listen to the snow touch the canvas overhead. Supplies are low, animals are tired. Patience is worn almost as thin as the sugar bag. Still, the wheels are intact. The family is together. And somewhere beyond the next ridges the road is expected to end. Morning arrives beneath a sky the colour of cold ash. Snow lies thinly across the road, softening the ruts and hiding smaller stones. The wagon cover carries a white dusting along its curved roof. When you brush it away, the canvas gives a tired sigh beneath your hand. The oxen stand close together, breathing pale clouds into the air. The weaker animal has survived the night. It moves stiffly, but it eats a little grass uncovered beneath a tree. Nobody speaks loudly while camp is broken. The destination is said to be close. You have heard those words before, but today the guide points toward a low gap between the ridges and says that the valley lies beyond it. You study his face for signs of uncertainty. There are none. The remaining supplies return to the wagon. Flour comes back from the neighbour who carried it yesterday. The medicine box is tucked near the bedding. The family quilt is rolled while still warm from sleeping bodies. The blue cup waits inside the coffee pot. The wagon begins its final climb. The road rises through pine trees and exposed stone. Snow melts beneath the wheels, turning patches of earth dark and slick. Everyone walks. Even the youngest child insists on taking several steps before accepting a place inside. The weakened ox does not pull. It follows behind on a rope while borrowed animals help move the wagon. Their owner walks beside your husband, calling steady commands. The company advances slowly, but the familiar anxiety has changed. Each difficult yard now feels like part of a closing distance rather than an endless road. Near midday, the trees begin to thin. You hear the lead wagons stop. At first, you fear another broken wheel. Another exhausted animal, another obstacle hidden beneath snow. Then someone ahead begins laughing. The sound travels backward through the company. You reach the crest. Below a valley opens beneath clear light. Dark forests frame fields and scattered buildings. Smoke rises from chimneys. A river curves across the lower ground, reflecting the sky. Fences, roofs, barns and roads appear in shapes so ordinary that they seem almost impossible. The children stare. Your husband removes his hat. You rest one hand against the wagon side, feeling the rough wood beneath your palm. It is the same gesture you made on the first morning, when the yard was damp, the house stood behind you, and the entire road remained unknown. Now the wagon carries scratches, patches, stains, and repaired joints. One wheel holds a replacement spoke wrapped with rawhide. The canvas bears marks from hail and rain. The rear board is dark where countless hands have pushed it uphill. A broadly accepted fact of Western migration is that arrival did not always mean immediate comfort. Families might reach a settlement, claim, mission, or relatives' farm only to face winter shelter, land disputes, shortages, debt, and another round of building. The trail could end before hardship did. Still, a roof stands below. Water runs nearby. There are people who know the country. For this moment, that is enough. The descent into the valley is careful. Wheels are chained on the steepest portion. Ropes hold the wagon from behind. Everyone moves with the caution learned through months of mistakes. When the road finally levels, children run ahead. A dog races from a farmhouse, barking wildly. Someone comes to the doorway. More figures appear. News spreads that another wagon company has arrived. You pass fenced fields where late crops have been gathered. The smell of wood smoke drifts across the road. It mingles with damp soil, livestock, and something baking in a nearby house. Fresh bread. The scent nearly stops you. At the edge of the settlement, wagons gather on open ground. Names are exchanged. Relatives search faces. Strangers offer directions, water, and questions. Your family has no completed house waiting. A small cabin may be borrowed for several nights, but it's crowded already. So the wagon will serve as home once more, this time without needing to move at dawn. A peculiar custom among some newly arrived families was to keep living from their wagons while building shelter, sometimes for weeks. After surviving months on the road, the wagon remained familiar, organised, and dry enough. A rough cabin could feel less comfortable than the cramped vehicle everyone had spent the journey complaining about. You laugh when this is explained. The wagon apparently has won. Researchers continue to examine how emigrants define the true end of a journey. Was it the first sight of the valley, the arrival at a fort, the crossing of a territorial boundary, the purchase of land, or the first night beneath a permanent roof? Diaries answer differently. Arrival could be a single moment or a long process of becoming settled. For you, it begins with unloading. The flour sack comes out almost empty. The bacon barrel contains salt and little else. Tools are placed on the ground. Bedding is carried toward the borrowed cabin. Objects emerge in the order of survival. A skillet blackened by hundreds of fires. The sewing kit with fewer needles. Letters protected inside the family Bible. One wooden horse, worn smooth from children's hands. The curved rocker removed from the baby's cradle. At last, you lift out the coffee pot. You unwrap the cloth inside. The blue cup catches the evening light. A tiny chip marks the rim. You do not remember when it happened. Perhaps the river crossing caused it. Perhaps a mountain descent. Perhaps the cup has always carried the floor and you never noticed. You pour coffee into it. The drink is weak, but the cup makes it taste like home. That night the family returns to the wagon for one final sleep beneath the canvas. No alarm is set for dawn. No flour must be measured for another 20 miles. No captain will call the train forward. The oxen graze inside a fenced field free of their yokes. You spread the family quilt across the bedding. The children settle close, too tired to speak for long. Your husband lies near the open flap watching the lights of the settlement. The wagon creaks as bodies shift. For months that sound has meant movement, strain, and another uncertain mile. Tonight it is only wood cooling beneath the stars. You listen to the quieter sounds around you. A distant door closes. A dog gives one soft bark. Water moves somewhere beyond the fields. The wind touches the canvas, but it does not carry dust, hail, or snow. It enters gently through the open flap and moves across your face. Your hand rests near the children. Their breathing is deep and even. The baby turns beneath the quilt. The little wooden horse lies beside one sleeping arm. Nothing more needs to be packed tonight. Nothing more needs to be abandoned beside the road. The wagon has carried food, tools, illness, arguments, births, repairs, fear, and hope. It has been pantry, bedroom, shelter, sick room, and refuge. It has held too much and never enough. Now its work grows quiet. The wheels remain still. The patched canvas glows faintly beneath the moon. Your thoughts begin to slow as the valley settles around you. The long road behind seems softer now, each hard mile fading into distance, each river becoming only a silver line beneath memory, each mountain lowering gently beneath the dark. You breathe in. The air smells of pine, cooling earth, and the last trace of coffee. You breathe out. Your shoulders loosen. The children are safe beside you. The animals are resting. The supplies have lasted. Morning will bring new work, but it will not bring another departure. The wagon gives one final creak. Then even that sound fades. The canvas rises and falls almost like a slow breath above you, and the night draws closer, calm and warm, wrapping the tiny wooden home in silence. You let the road disappear. You let the wheels stop turning. You let the valley hold you. And very softly, with no distance left to cross, you close your eyes. Sweet dreams.